The Bears were all over the media this week. Let's dig into what we found the most interesting.
That and more on this episode of the Halas Huddle podcast. Huddle up! Huddle up, Bears fans. It's great to be here. We have a winner. We have a winner for our giveaway. The infamous They Are Who We Thought They Were game, Brian Urlacher image. Ran the drawing today, so everyone who got in before the deadline yesterday was put into the drawing. And our winner is a guy who has been pretty active in the chat recently, so definitely appreciate that. Not someone who just, popped in and just did a quick huddle up. Like, there's been some conversation back and forth, and we really appreciate that. Not that it was needed, but congratulations and huddle up to William Barrett, 5292. Okay, William Barrett, 5292. I will reach out to you. We will get your contact information, and we will get you that photo.
Yeah, thanks for the support, William. Thanks to everyone else who did comment. Even if it was just huddle up, we really appreciate all the subscribers and all the participation in the videos here. It makes it really fun for us to keep doing this.
Yeah, and what's great is this is not going to be the only giveaway. There will be other things that happen in the future, so definitely stick with us, stay subscribed, and check out our videos as we present more opportunities for you to win things. But let's get into it, because like Bob said at the beginning of the show, there's a lot that has been going on regarding the Chicago Bears. Last week, I put a video out specifically about the stadium, and I actually had some information wrong, because the stuff that was published back in December when the agreement was made between the Chicago Bears and Arlington Heights.
We're having a battle, Rob. Sorry.
We were doing it at the same time. I was like, why is this?
Right, yeah.
So anyway, back in December when the Chicago Bears made a agreement with Arlington Heights, there wasn't a lot of information about it out there other than they made a property tax agreement. They were going to assess the property at 10% versus 25%. There was an agreement on how long it was going to be frozen for. A lot of information, but it wasn't specific to the point where I understood that there actually had to be a legislative bill passed. And I did talk about how the funding for the infrastructure had to be approved. That was what I thought was also in the legislative action that took place yesterday that didn't happen. So basically, no bills were passed regarding the Chicago Bears Stadium. And we're basically looking at 2026 as most likely the soonest that anything's going to happen.
So, I mean, that's what I think we just want to make clear, that there were two separate bills that were going to be maybe proposed, maybe passed, maybe not, that affected the Bears, plus potentially the Bears sneaking into the Illinois state budget, and that didn't happen. Now, what does that necessarily mean in terms of what the Bears are going to do? Can they just move forward without these bills being passed? I mean, they can. But should they? Is it in their best interest? I think that's what's still up for debate. So we just don't really know. So, I mean, I think we kind of knew there was a chance Illinois would do nothing. But I just don't know how prepared the Bears were for and if they had any contingency for that.
Well, I know you guys know a lot more about the specifics of the bills, but one of them was kind of interesting, and one of you can talk to it, but about the team that wants to build has to have a winning record for a certain number of years if they want public money. Now, I think in general, what that speaks to is people are not excited at a time where the economy is rough on a lot of people to be having public money go to these teams of leagues that are making millions and billions. And so the one thing, Rob, in your episode that you did speak to is that if the money is going to infrastructure, which can benefit the community at large, I think that's a better way to use that money if it's going to come from public funding. But then I think the Bears really do have an onus when they have this stadium and campus up and running to have a benefit for the community. So hopefully that's, what they're thinking of in terms of how it will get used whenever this thing eventually is built.
So originally, the $2.3 billion for the stadium itself was going to be funded specifically by the Chicago Bears. The rest of the money that they're looking for, which was well, originally between 2 and 3 extra billion was more for infrastructure. That's the public funding they were looking for. The problem is the longer that this takes, I mean, we're seeing, I don't want to get political, but we're seeing increases in things because of tariffs. We're seeing increases because of inflation. The costs are just going up. Every year, it's just going to get more and more expensive. I'll throw it back to you, Bob, because I know you're about to say something. But the one thing is, I don't particularly fault Kevin Warren for all of this, because Illinois politics is just a shit show to begin with. But I do wonder if he spent way too much time going back and forth between both locations. And I wonder if they just did zero in. And I know they had the property tax issue, and probably, saying that they were going to Chicago is probably going to help. Is probably what helped get that agreement back in December on the table. But I do wonder if waiting so long, because it wasn't until like the end of March, beginning of April, that it was like, oh, they're flipping the script. They're going back to Arlington Heights. They didn't get them their traffic information, anything that was needed until like the last minute. And look, we know how slow politics moves too. So I just don't know if that is playing a part in it. And I will put a little bit of onus on Kevin Warren for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd assume there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we know publicly. So hopefully a lot of that stuff is going on the scenes. There are conversations, there is information being shared between the Bears and the state and the county and the city and all this stuff. I heard one thing that said there's an actual politician from the city of Chicago who was actively trying to stop that tax approval bill, because it would hurt Arlington Heights' chances to put Chicago back in the mix. So, I mean, there's always politics that are going on. And now when it comes to public money, I mean, I tend to agree with Justin that, it makes a lot more sense for public money to go to public things like utilities, transportation, education. That money is for that, so let's use it for that. But I think it's also, at some point, the fans, whether it's through tax money or just through fees, are paying for this stadium. Okay, if the Bears don't get public money for the infrastructure upgrades or whatever it is, the Bears are going to have to pay for it, and the fans are going to pay the Bears back for that, right? So it is coming back on the fans, no matter what, whether it's through taxes or through fees or through, maybe the PSLs are going to be way more expensive than they need to be, right? Or, there's just going to be certain it will come back. The fans are paying for this one way or another. It's just a matter of exactly on paper how's it going to get done.
Well,
right,
they'll be willing to pay if the product on the field is better. So let's get to football. Come on.
Yeah, let's get to football. So ESPN has put out an article with, a bunch of different predictions, basically. Some of the things that they had talked about were playoff chances, just a lot of different stats. So just really quick, Bob, I know you had pulled this up earlier, so can you start? Because I can't find my list.
Yeah, no problem. So ESPN does this. It's called Football Power Index. It's FPI. It's basically computer rankings, an algorithm that goes on and rates teams based on various things. And it has the Bears ranked in the NFL smack dab right in the middle at 16, which is interesting because we all know what the Bears' record of the last 3 seasons has been, and they see that they're going to be an NFL average team, which is kind of exciting. A couple other things that were of note with it is that it does have the Bears finishing 4th in the division. However, they have a 15% chance to win the division, which is by far the highest of any team that they have projected to finish 4th in their division. So, like you're saying, there's a chance, right? And I think one more thing I found was interesting was they rate offense and defensive power separately, and the Bears are tied for 5th best in the NFL on defense, which is interesting. Right behind Eagles are way ahead, and then the Vikings, Chiefs, Ravens are 2 through 4, and then the Bears right there are tied with the Broncos, Texans, and Steelers is 5th in the league. So those are some pretty interesting things. They run these numbers through a computer, and that's what pops out.
Well, you're right, Bob. Over a few years now, it would be a climb to be average, and hopefully they can exceed that expectation. But when you're one of these teams that's historically been terrible, to even be seen as mediocre is kind of saying something. And clearly that's the Ben Johnson effect. Clearly, a lot of moves were made in the offseason, but you got to do it. And until you show it, us as Bears fans, we can't expect too much more than that. So I'd be curious to know year after year that they've been doing this. How do their preseason rankings compare to end results, who knows? But injuries and things that they can't possibly project obviously come into play. But if the Bears can be 16th in that range of playoff contending, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Justin, you hit the nail on the head when you said the Ben Johnson effect, and it kind of stole my thunder here because I was going to bring that up. I read that according to their FBI ratings last year, they were only 24th. So to go from 24 with a losing season up to 16, I mean, that's clearly the Ben Johnson effect.
Or a legitimate offensive line effect.
Yeah, Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney's a little, he's pretty good.
We'll see.
Speaking of Joe Thuney.
Speaking of Joe Thuney, look at that segue.
So there was a CBS article. Originally, I was going to try to stump you guys and see if you could figure it out. But CBS, I think it was probably when there was 100 days until opening kickoff, wanted to say who are the 100 most important players coming into the NFL season. Now, the caveat here is they did do it by division. So in a way, they kind of equalized it. So every team would have somewhat equal representation. In reality, I don't know if that's true. I mean, there could be a separate list of just who are the top 100 best players. That's not exactly what this was. But who are the 100 most important players in the NFL? And there were 3 on the Bears. So originally I was going to have you guys try to figure out who they are, but instead I think I'll reveal that. And we talk about, why those 3 are important and maybe if there are other Bears that should have possibly been considered. So the first one, very obvious, Caleb Williams. We talked about Ben Johnson coming. We talked about the revamped offensive line and more weapons for Caleb. So he obviously has to take a step. Next was Joe Thuney. Huge acquisition coming off of 2 consecutive All-Pro selections. So even though he's on the older side, it's not as if you're getting some, washed up has-been. Hopefully they're getting a quality piece of the line that can really raise the game of the other offensive linemen. And the third one was Montez Sweat. One thing I did find fascinating in reading the article, even though his sack numbers were down last year, they said his pressure rate was actually up from his season two seasons ago where he led 2 teams in sacks, which, again, sounds really good for him, but it's actually quite pathetic for those 2 teams. But those were the 3 they identified. So what do you guys think of those 3? And were there any Bears you think should have made that list over any of them?
I think those are the 3 probably most important on the team. So, yeah, I don't think that there would have been anything that you could have done differently unless – look, so you had mentioned, how many players per team. I did look at the division, and I only looked at the division. But, the Lions had 4, the Vikings had 4, the Packers only had 2, and then the Bears had 3. So had the Bears had 4, I think Jalen Johnson should have been like – the honorable mention there. I think the cornerbacks, the defensive backs are very important to this team. And Montez Sweat's coming off a down year. But one thing to note when it comes to Montez Sweat is, look, he had more pressures last year than he did the year he had 12.5 sacks. So it's just, can he actually get on the stat sheet with sacks this year instead of only coming up with 5.5? I don't know how else you could come away with a different version of this. Seeing how bad the offensive line was the year before, I think having Thuney here is very, very important. Maybe you throw in Drew Dahlman, but I think Thuney is obviously the smarter play here. I don't know. Bob, did you have any other different opinions on that?
I mean, you guys are right. It's kind of hard to argue with those 3. Obviously, Caleb Williams being the quarterback and the #1 overall pick and all that stuff is pretty clear and obvious. Thuney, I think, is just like, look at probably Madden ratings or whatever. He's got to be by far the best player on the team. And it makes sense. Montez Sweat, you want your highest paid player to be your best player. But I think another way to think about importance is the, impact or above projections that they might make. So 2 guys I think could make a huge impact this year, be very important, are Rome Odunze on offense. He's if he can step in to be a legitimate #1 weapon on offense. Nothing against DJ Moore, but I mean, he's 8 years in the league now. We know what he is. He's an excellent player, but I mean, we know that he's limited at being very good, and he can be one of the best in the league. I don't know. Rome still has that potential. And the other guy on defense, Rob, I'm going to give you your guy here. I think it's Dexter. I think it's Gervon Dexter. It's great that if Montez Sweat's your best defensive lineman, but more important than him being your best defensive lineman is somebody else matching that impact or surpassing it. And if that's Gervon Dexter, might have the highest potential on defensive line to be that guy.
One interesting thing to add on Dexter, Montez Sweat was interviewed at OTAs and had talked about how Dexter's really stepping up as a leader. So this is a huge season for him. There's a lot of guys who this is a big season for. Tyreek Stevenson. But at a national level, this is a national article. They're not going to pick a guy like Tyreek Stevenson when you have the three names we just mentioned. But at a local level, Halas Huddle level, that's another name of a guy who has an important season coming up.
Yeah, that would have been interesting if he somehow made the list. All right, well, let's move on. I briefly touched on this from a media standpoint last week when the press conference happened with Caleb Williams, and it was more along the lines of, look, I was just tired of the media pushing for this and even pushing for this to happen, and then turning around, and then after it did happen, a lot of the media, especially local media, 670 The Score, I'm going to throw his name out there, Lawrence Holmes. He pissed me off. Literally while listening to, or immediately after the press conference, it just happened to be on the radio. I just happened to be in the car because it's the only time I listen to the radio. And it was Lawrence Holmes pretty much basically saying he didn't like what Caleb Williams had to say. So now let's actually dive into what Caleb Williams had to say. I'll throw it to you first, Justin. What did you think of the press conference? From a word standpoint, and was it needed? Was it overblown? What do you think?
I mean, I kind of agree with you. Like, the media just made it like he has to speak on this. This is a big story, when really they were the ones making it a bigger story. Now, I pretty much always am going to side with players over organization. And I'll be honest, I don't like the whole draft process. I mean, him and his camp, saying what they want or thinking what they wanted to think about the different teams that he could potentially go to, that all makes sense. And something that I forgot to mention when we first spoke about this, we talked about Caleb Williams' father and how, as a dad, what you would do for your son and this type of thing. But what I forgot is Caleb Williams does not have an agent and is representing himself / probably his family is representing him. So that adds to what they were thinking. But also, I think the one mistake I would put on Caleb and his camp, because in the actual press conference, he says, hey, these were just thoughts. I thought Kevin O'Connell was a great coach. He won coach of the year. These were just thoughts. But you then told it to a reporter. And so that was the one mistake I would put on them. The last thing I'll say, the Bears need to care about what he thinks about them as an organization when it's time to extend him from his rookie contract. That's when it will matter what he thought of them. It doesn't matter what he thought pre-draft. It doesn't even matter what he thinks now. The things need to start going in the right direction, and what he thinks when it's time to extend him is going to matter quite a lot.
And so I'm going to push back a little bit on the media part of this. Like, this is a story. Like, it's interesting. I definitely think it's worth talking about. Here we are talking about, I think, for the third episode of our last 4 or something like that. Like, it's worth talking about. Where I will agree with you on the media blowing up that Caleb should have talked 2 weeks ago or something like that. Like, that was just them being like, I have a story I want to write and I want his quote, so you better make me happy. Give me your quotes. Like, that part of it is, I agree, media overblowing it. But, Caleb did make those comments on the record, right? And I don't necessarily think that was a mistake. What I think the mistake is how we're interpreting those comments, right? I don't think those comments were made 4 months after the fact, like, oh man, I really wanted to go to Minnesota and play for O'Connell. It was, I just talked to O'Connell. I don't know what I'm going to be doing yet. The draft is still 4 months away. I just really liked O'Connell. I'm going to see what we can do. And then time goes on. You talk to the Bears. Oh, I like the Bears, so I'm going to stay with the Bears, right? Like, we're trying, like, the timeline, I think, is getting all messed up in all of this. And it's like the way it played out, the way it happened is the way it should happen. We had a kid who's really talented. He believes he should be the number 1 overall pick, but he doesn't know if he wants to go to the team that has the number 1 pick. So what do? You explore all your options. And these quotes that are being made are just being made at the time while he's exploring his options, and then they're being published a year later, and it just confuses it. Like, I don't have a problem with anything that he did at that time. I don't have a problem with anything that he said last week. Like, it's an interesting thing to hear somebody say on the record, a quarterback, number 1 overall, that's where quarterbacks go to die. I know his dad said it. Like, it's interesting. So that's why we're talking about it. But that also doesn't mean it's like a bad thing or he's a bad guy or we need to be worried about it. Like, it's just what should have happened. And it's interesting that we know that it actually happened.
You hit it on the head, and he addressed it exactly how you said it, because his exact quote was, but something that keeps getting lost, something that keeps getting, I think, not being addressed the way it needs to be, is the fact that I went on that visit first, then came here, and then after I came here, I went back home, talked to my dad, and all the things that were supposed to be these big things that everybody's talking about recently, one never happened, in the sense of they were all thoughts, they were just all ideas. I think if you're in the situation, he goes into the father-son stuff. But, like, again, he went there first, just like you said. Then after that visit, he made the decision, like, look, yes, I can do this, and I want to do this. I want to make history here. So getting upset about that just doesn't make any sense to me. And then the film comments. So the film comments obviously did involve things that had happened throughout the year. And I've heard some players say some things, and I've heard some players say other things. You know, Kurt Warner kind of sided with Emmanuel Acho and said, you know, as a quarterback, you're not meeting with your coaches, and they're not showing you what you want, you know, what they want you to see all the time. But I feel like when you're a rookie and you're coming into like having a brand new system, and you're an organization that has not developed a quarterback in its entire existence. I mean, let's be honest. In its entire existence, they have not developed a single quarterback. Jim McMahon was decent, wasn't great, but decent, and you know they kind of lucked into that. I'm not going to comment on Sid Luckman. I have no idea how quarterback development happened back then, but you should do everything you freaking can to make your quarterback the best that they can be. And I understand during like this time of the year, the coaches can only meet with them so many times. And we'll talk about one thing that seems to have maybe changed a little bit and helped in the next segment. But I don't know. It's just frustrating to hear, like, why wouldn't you just give, and he addressed it. Look, it's not that I don't know how to watch film. It's like, I just was looking for shortcuts. How can I watch film more efficiently? What can I do? You know, look, this is your offense that you want me to run. What should I be looking for here? And he just wasn't getting it. But it wasn't just him. That's the issue. There were multiple players saying, we were not being coached hard enough. Coaches, Thomas Brown literally saying, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing as a coach, right? Like, it was a shit show here in Chicago. I'm not blaming Caleb Williams one bit. Let's move on. We got Ben Johnson here, the Ben Johnson effect. Let's hope that means, you know, we're already seeing it. And if I don't have anything else to say here, so let's move on to the OTA section, and we'll lead into that. All right. So the Ben Johnson effect, you know, I'm not going to touch on it a lot because I know, Justin, you wanted to bring it up. Like, it's already being seen in the little bit amount of time that it's here. So I'm going to throw it to you and let you talk.
Sure. I mean, I think one thing we have to also just tap the brakes on a little bit. They've had 6 OTAs, and only 2 of them the media was present for. So some of the stuff we're speaking to, we don't know if we're seeing one fragment of the thing or if we're seeing a broader pattern or theme. However, for this part, I do sense that this is a thing that is happening every single time they're together. Is the details matter. We're not skirting by things. We're not letting things kind of fester. As simple as it sounds, getting in and out of a huddle, which I know came up last year, but it clearly was not addressed last year. Now it's being addressed. There were times where they would come out of the huddle, he sent them back. No. And Caleb, in his presser, it was a little part of it where it was actual football he was talking, said something, I think PSP, pre-snap procedures or something. They clearly are making this a point of emphasis. And I don't think people sometimes want to give it as much credit as it matters. Going in a huddle and coming out clean matters when you look at, now you're coming out of the huddle with 17 seconds, let's say, on the play clock. You can see where the defense is setting up and make on-site adjustments, as opposed to how many times are the Bears last season coming out of the huddle with only 6 seconds on the clock, and you just have to rush and get up there. And like you said, Rob, you're talking about a rookie last year having to do all that in a short period of time and probably not being coached up very well on what he should even be looking for. So I feel something like that matters a lot. And the fact that they're spending so much time on that in May will have benefits that you'll reap the benefits of that in September, October, November. So that's one thing about OTAs that I liked. What about you, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you said. We've had coaches here before, Nagy, Luquezzi, where there's just pre-snap penalties, formations that are just illegal and all this stuff, and that's because it's just not being stressed in practice. You love to see it. I mean, the other thing that we kind of talked about with Caleb Williams in the film, like maybe if Case Keenum was in this locker room last year, maybe Caleb Williams would know how to watch film. Right, that kind of presence of just this is how you break it down. This is what you do. This is what we're looking for with this concept against this concept. Is just something that he was asking for and didn't get. And to some other people in the media, hey, the offensive coordinator isn't supposed to hold your hand and watch film. That's fine, but maybe your veteran quarterback is. So I know that I've said multiple times on this podcast that Case Keenum's impact is going to be overblown. But I guess that doesn't mean that there's zero impact that he would bring. So it was very interesting to see. Case Keenum's press conference itself was very compelling and interesting. Seems just like a great guy. And then the impact that Ben Johnson talked about he had been having already as well is really interesting. So I don't know how much that's going to translate to a real backup quarterback competition, but it's just nice to see that this veteran quarterback seems to be making an impact.
Yeah, and the pre-snap stuff. I was watching some film on the Detroit Lions just this past weekend. And one of the things that they like to do a lot is get to the line of scrimmage and snap the ball quickly. They would do it, where the defense couldn't get set. So like you would have the linebackers, how a lot of times like the linebackers will come up to the line of scrimmage and you don't know which one's blitzing or are they not blitzing and they're dropping back and they're trying to disguise things. That wasn't even happening half the time because they would get in their cadence, especially on the road, right? They would get in their they would get set. Sometimes they'd even send the wide receivers out first, and then the rest of the team would go up to the line. And then almost as soon as they got there, the center would look, make sure everyone was set, and snap the ball. There wasn't even a cadence. And I think this is a Ben Johnson thing. It's extremely important for the team to understand what he wants and how quickly it needs to happen. And they're going to have to get this down over the next 2 months before the season starts.
Yeah, for sure. A couple more quick things about OTAs I found interesting. Ozzie Trapilo getting some first team reps. Again, like Justin, you said, we've only seen 2 practices over the media. We don't know if they're alternating days between Amagaji and Trapilo, and we just happen to see. But it's just the second round guy everyone thought was right tackle only, which we know he wasn't, is getting left tackle first team reps, which is kind of interesting. And the other thing that I heard was Brisker looks really good. So you love to see that. And obviously just another concussion away from not looking so good, but it's good to see that he's out there looking like himself again. It just makes you feel good about that. So,
one other quick thing that we didn't have in the notes was Montez Sweat has been there. And he said the reason he showed up this year is because he didn't like his performance last year. So look, he's taking ownership of it. And even though he had his more pressures than he did the year before, he's taking ownership of not getting those sacks. Justin, did you have something? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just, 2 OTA practices were covered. Amagaji started one of them at left tackle, Trapilo the other. However, reports are saying that Trapilo looked really good in it. Now, there's no pads. There's none of that. So, what does it mean? Who knows?
I'll also reports were that Amagaji didn't look so good as well. Slow out of his stance again. Okay. So.
Well, speaking of Ozzie Trapilo, the Chicago Bears released a 1920 football drive episode. We love these. I do personally. This one was supposed to be the fun one that I really would have enjoyed because it was all about the NFL draft. It was like the behind the scenes stuff that you saw, scouts on the road, stuff that you saw at the combine, comments that they made during the draft, right? And I don't know. I was a little bit let down. I'll let you guys talk about it first, but I'll throw it to you first, Bob, because I think I've gone to Justin twice in a row. So, Bob, what did you think of this episode?
I mean, we got to know what this is. It's an interesting look behind the curtain, but it's a highly curated look behind the curtain. It's a puff piece. I mean, they're not really going to show you who they were upset about that they didn't get right before they picked who they're obviously very excited about. DA loves Hippolyte, right? But was he the guy that absolutely is the only guy he wanted there? Like who knows? There were a couple things I did find really interesting with some Ryan Poles stuff, actually. After the Burden pick, there was a little interview with him, and he definitely mentioned Tyler Scott as still being a weapon he's looking at on the team. So that was, I guess he's still got a spot, or it's just something he didn't want to leave him out. But I don't know. That was something I thought worth mentioning. And then when they picked Newman in the 6th round, it definitely seemed like this is a guy that Poles himself is really in on and is kind of looked at. And, there's a comment like Cunningham said he finally got your guy, and he's like, yeah, now I just hope I'm right. So it's just interesting to kind of see those little personal touches now, whether they really mean anything or not. But it's just like it's clear that Newman's Poles guy, so that's just kind of fun and interesting.
Didn't he already get his guy in Ryan Bates? I'm sorry.
Cunningham might have been saying that because he was really pushing him to do the "Hello, Newman." Like,
well, there's that too. Yeah, you were going hard on that.
But another Ian Cunningham thing, and I should have rewatched it because I only watched it the one time. But when they took Trapillo, I think he said something like, "We have our offensive line," and so knowing that he played right tackle his last 2 years at Boston College, knowing that the only obvious spot where the Bears really need a guy still is left tackle. Now to hear he is getting a look there, that may say that in the scouting process, they already knew we like him as a left tackle. When they traded back, they were very much thinking we need to still get him. After him, it's a drop-off. Whereas we not to go back into all the details, but we were draft night saying, oh, there's still a couple guys they could take at tackle. They thought he was the one of those remaining. So that was interesting. Now, as much as it all looked like, roses and everything like that, I would just be curious to see how they were talking about Velus Jones on draft night. You're always going to hear. I mean, I remember Velas's first interview. I heard him on the Score. They said, "What are your goals?" He said a gold jacket. So, I mean, he could buy one, but
yeah,
I don't think he's getting the one he was referring to. So, hopefully these pan out. Hippolyte, like you mentioned, Bob, they showed the part about him. They made it look like every team in the league was like wanting this guy, and we on draft day thought major reach. So who knows? Only time will tell.
Speaking of OTAs, though, he was getting some reps with the ones. So
somebody's got to get the reps with Sam.
Yeah, him and Sewell. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully he proves me completely wrong.
Yeah, of course. We're rooting for him. It's not anything like that. It's just
So the two things that I picked up on the episode that haven't been mentioned yet is, and it's a puff piece, like you said. So there was a comment when Kevin Warren was talking to Ryan Poles and said, so something along the lines of, so you think you're staying at 39? And he said, yeah. Now my question in that instance is, how much conversation was there before where you were trying to move up and it just wasn't happening? And then it's like, that was the reaction to it, because it made it seem like, oh no, we're going to stay at 39. We're not going to try to move up, when clearly there's reports saying that they were trying to move up, most likely for Trevion Henderson. Right. But I'm happy they got Luther Burden. The other thing was they were using their analytics for those 2 second-round picks and trying to determine what's their chance of percentage of landing those guys at certain spots. And it sounds like they actually flipped which guy they were going to take first, taking Trapillo earlier than Turner. And I think they said they had about an 86% chance on getting Turner and that second rounder. So it's cool to see, those things play out. The analytics part of it, it'd be cool to actually be in the room and hear it from start to finish and, see it play out throughout the whole offseason. I don't know if I'll ever get that chance, but that's my dream.
Hey, there's Make-A-Wish Foundation, so maybe.
I mean, I hope I'm not dying.
Well, I'm just saying, if it comes to that, at the very end, if it comes to that, make sure you put down.
That's true.
Sit in on pre-draft meetings with the Chicago Bears.
That's true. All right, let's throw it real quick for last words. Bob, you first. Since I went Justin twice, I'll go you twice.
Yeah, I'm just excited about full team mandatory participation next week. There's going to be full interviews every day. I'm going to eat up every single minute of those press conferences, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be excited about the Bears as much as we've been excited before, and it just turns out horribly in the end. It's just fun to still be excited, and I'm excited right now.
I'm just excited about Case Keenum. I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I agree with you, Bob. Like, hey, every day we're one day closer to real football. So that's it.
You guys hit it on the head. I got nothing else to add. So let's just end the show. Halas Huddlers, please like, comment, subscribe. We want to continue to build this thing. So I guess these are my last words. You know what? Last words after you said Make-A-Wish Foundation, that's probably a horrible way to end the show. But bear down, claws up.
Ready, break.